Imagine updating your job title today. Ochre mixer, second in command of the pigment station, reporting to nobody because there is no LinkedIn, no performance review, and definitely no 47 bullet points about being a self-starter with strong communication skills. And yet, that was a real job. For 99% of human history, you didn't apply for work. You were simply the person in the group who was best at one specific, strange, useful thing, and your neighbors depended on you being good at it. Right now, picture South Africa, roughly 100,000 years ago. Not a metaphor, an actual workshop, found inside a cave called Blombos. Archaeologist Christopher Henshelwood and his team uncovered grinding stones, shell containers, and processed red pigment, all in one spot. Someone sat there, regularly, mixing ochre into paint, probably for skin, for status, maybe for something closer to religion. That person had a job. You could call them the world's first cosmetics chemist, and honestly, the title fits better than you'd expect. Here's where it gets interesting. You've probably pictured ancient humans as one undifferentiated blur of hunting and starving. That picture is wrong, and it's been wrong for a while. Real specialization existed. Toolmakers who only made tools, trackers who only tracked, people whose entire contribution to the group was one narrow skill, refined obsessively, because a whole tribe's survival occasionally hinged on it. Think about your own job for a second. You probably have a title, a narrow set of responsibilities, and a group of people around you who each handle something you don't. That structure feels distinctly modern, something invented by offices and org charts. It isn't. It's closer to the default setting for human groups, stretching back further than almost anyone assumes. Let's put you in one of those roles for a second. You're a toolmaker at an Upper Paleolithic camp, and someone new to the group asks what you do all day. Your answer sounds almost comic to modern ears. You say, "I strike stone at a precise angle until it splits into a blade sharp enough to cut through hide in one motion, and I do this every day, for everyone, because if I get it wrong, someone doesn't eat tonight." That's not a job description you'd see on a careers page, but it's accurate. And it's also, somehow, exactly the kind of high-stakes precision work that would get you a six-figure salary and a stress ulcer in 2026. But it gets stranger. At sites like Grotte du Renne in France, researcher Francesco De Rico has traced elaborate shell bead traditions, ornaments that took real time and real specialized skill to produce. Someone was, effectively, the group's jeweler. Not a hobbyist making one bead for fun, a dedicated producer making ornaments other people wore to signal who they were. Status work, identity work, the same impulse that fills modern jewelry stores, just running on shell and bone instead of gold and glass. Stay with me, because the job list keeps getting weirder. There's evidence for people who specialized in reading animal behavior well enough to predict it, essentially professional trackers, whose entire skill set was noticing details you would walk straight past. A broken twig means one thing, a slightly different depth of hoofprint means something else entirely. You would not survive an afternoon doing this job. Most modern people can't tell a deer trail from a dog trail, let alone read weight distribution and time of day off a single print in the dirt. There's likely been someone in every group whose job was managing conflict, someone whose job was memory, keeping the map of who owed what to whom, who had a dispute with who last season, whose sister married into which family. No spreadsheets. No contracts. Just one person's brain, functioning as the group's entire legal and social record. You lose that person, and you lose the tribe's memory along with them. And then there's a job that sounds almost too modern to be ancient, the healer. Every group seems to have had someone who managed the unknown, illness, injury, death, bad dreams. Not a doctor in the way you'd recognize one, but a specialist all the same, someone who knew which plants stopped bleeding, which ones eased pain, and which rituals helped a frightened community make sense of something they couldn't explain. You'd probably call this person's job title something like shaman or healer, and their work sat somewhere between medicine and psychology, centuries before either existed as a word. Here's the part nobody tells you. You've probably assumed all of this backbreaking specialized labor meant ancient people worked constantly, grinding away just to survive another day. In 1963 and 1964, anthropologist Richard Lee spent time directly studying the Dil Kung San, a hunter-gatherer group in Botswana, and clocked their actual working hours. The number that came back was somewhere around 15 to 20 hours a week, spent on hunting and gathering enough food to live well. 15 to 20 hours. That's not even a full modern work week. In 1972, anthropologist Marshall Salins took data like this and built an idea he called the original affluent society. Not affluent in the sense of owning things, affluent because their wants were small and their environment met them, so people had enormous amounts of leisure time compared to almost anyone working a modern job. You've been taught to picture ancient life as relentless toil. The honest picture looks more like specialized, skilled part-time work, followed by a lot of sitting around the fire doing very little. Try mapping your own week onto that number. You probably work 40 hours, then commute, then answer messages after dinner, then wonder where the weekend went. 15 to 20 hours of skilled, specialized work, then genuine rest, isn't a fantasy you invented. It's closer to how your ancestors actually lived, for most of the time humans have existed at all. Let that sit for a second, because it flips something. Progress, in the popular imagination, means working harder for more stuff. But specialization existed before scarcity forced it. Your ochre mixer, your bead maker, your tool maker, they weren't grinding away out of desperation. They were often doing skilled, respected, oddly specific work, and then going home early. This isn't a fringe theory, as much as it sounds like one. It's built on decades of field work, and it quietly undercuts one of the most repeated stories you've probably absorbed without ever questioning it, that life only got easier as history moved forward. Now here's the twist nobody wants to hear. Agriculture, the thing usually described as human progress, seems to have made this worse, not better. Once people settled down to farm, work hours climbed. Hard, repetitive, back-breaking labor became the norm for far more of the population than it ever was before. The weird ancient jobs, the ochre mixer, the bead maker, the specialist tracker, those roles often came with more freedom than the grinding agricultural labor that replaced them. Progress, it turns out, is not always a straight line upward. And this is where it gets jaw-dropping, in a quieter way. Picture someone at Blombo's cave, kneeling over a grinding stone, mixing red ochre paste for a person's skin, 100,000 years ago. Now picture a lab technician in a cosmetics factory in 1960, mixing pigment for a foundation shade, checking it against a color chart under fluorescent light. Almost nothing connects these two people. Different tools, different language, different understanding of the universe entirely, but the instinct underneath is identical. Decorate the body, signal something about who you are, using color, using craft, using someone else's specialized labor. 100,000 years apart, and that one thread never broke. The honest answer is, we don't know exactly how these roles were assigned, whether by aptitude, by family, by pure accident of who happened to be sitting near the grinding stone that day. What we do know, from Blombo's, from Grotte du Renne, from the Kungsan data, is that specialized work, oddly specific, sometimes strange-sounding work, is not a modern invention. It's closer to a human constant. You've spent your whole life worried about what your job says about you. So did they. Not because either of you invented that worry, but because it seems to be baked into how humans organize themselves once a group gets big enough to need different skills doing different things at the same time. Someone always ends up as the toolmaker. Someone always ends up as the healer. Someone always ends up quietly grinding ochre in the corner. And the group needs all three, whether or not any of them ever gets thanked for it. The tools have changed almost completely. The question underneath them hasn't moved an inch. So here's a real question for the comments. If you'd lived 100,000 years ago, which strange, specific job do you think you'd have ended up with? The ochre mixer, the tool maker, the bead maker, or something else entirely? Tell me your answer below. Haha,